weekend and next week. Sophie.
Louise, thank you very much. And that's it from us on the BBC News at 6. It is time now to join our colleagues for the news where you are. Goodbye.
Hello, good evening. I'm Roger Johnson. Welcome to a special edition of North West Tonight, also across the UK this evening on the BBC News channel. On the day the teenager who murdered 3 little girls in Southport last summer is jailed. Killed in cold blood, Alice, Bibi and Elsie's attacker is told that he will spend at least 52 years in prison.
His terrifying attack resulted in the deaths of Bibi, Elsie and Alice, whose beautiful faces and names will be etched on the minds of people across Merseyside and indeed the UK forever.
Axel Rudikabana told police officers he was glad he'd killed the girls. The judge said it's unlikely he will ever be released.
It was of such extreme violence, of the utmost and exceptionally high seriousness, that it is difficult to comprehend why it was done.
The families of the murdered girls tell the world they don't want that to be their legacy.
The families very much want their daughters to be remembered for the way that they lived and not the way in which they died.
Questions will be asked of every agency if anything could have been done to stop the tragedy. And as we remember the victims of the attack, we're also with the people of Southport as they look to the future.
When you think about everything that's happened, the scale of the trauma, there has been that quiet dignity, and you have seen people just doing exceptional acts of kindness for each other.
Three little girls, Elsie Stancombe, Alice Da Silva Aguiar and Bibi King. At the start of their summer holidays, they went to a Taylor Swift dance class, innocent children, where they came face to face with the personification of evil. Axel Rudikabana was this afternoon jailed for a minimum of 52 years for murdering the girls, trying to kill 8 others and 2 adults. Had he been 9 days older, he would never be released. The judge said he doubts that he ever will. A coward to the end, Rudikabana twice disrupted the court today and wasn't there to hear his fate. Andy Gill was watching. He joins us now live from Liverpool Crown Court. Andy, the details of this case are too awful to report. Nonetheless, people may find what you have to say distressing, but this was the longest sentence ever handed to a teenager.
Roger, this has been a day of drama, of raw grief, of unspeakable horror. Axel Rudikabana was brought to Liverpool Crown Court amid tight security both outside the court and inside as well, to face justice for what he did in Southport nearly 6 months ago, and which has altered the lives of so many people. He murdered 3 girls, Elsie Stancombe, Bibi King and Alice Da Silva Aguiar, as they stood at a table making Taylor Swift friendship bracelets. He went in with a 20-centimetre long knife and systematically started stabbing children. He had other victims as well, 8 girls who were also injured, some in a life-threatening way and some in ways which will affect them for the rest of their lives. He also tried to murder 2 adults, Leanne Lucas, who organised that dance class, and John Hayes, a local man who confronted him. But what's come clear from today is that there are so many more victims. The mothers and fathers, the brothers and sisters, the wider families and the wider community in Southport as well.
And Andy, Rudikabana today tried to disrupt the proceedings in court, having been silent through most of his appearances previously.
He did. He started shouting that he needed a paramedic. He was ill, he said. He had chest pains. At one stage he said, "Don't ignore me." The judge ordered he be removed from the court. Then Diana Hare KC, who was prosecuting, outlined what actually happened on that day. She showed CCTV footage of him in the taxi going to the Hart space in Southport and then going into the building. And we also saw incredibly harrowing and distressing footage of girls running out of the building as the attack unfolded, screaming, and some of them collapsing in the street. We also heard details of the injuries they suffered, and I'm not going to go into detail because it's just too horrible. But just to give you some idea of the ferocity of this attack, he stabbed 13 people, and between them, those 13 people suffered more than 260 stab wounds. Today, though, was about the sentencing, and the judge said that if he'd been over 18, he would have got a whole life tariff. Because he was 17 when this happened, he couldn't. But he did get custody for life with a minimum of 52 years, is what the judge had to say.
At 11:45 that morning, he arrived and walked straight into the building, up the stairs to where he could hear the sound of happy children. In his mind was the intention to murder as many of them as he physically could. He wanted to try and carry out mass murder of innocent, happy young girls. The harm that Ruda Cabana has caused to each family, each child, and to the community has been profound and permanent. Whether his motivation was for terrorism or not misses the point. What he did on the 29th of July last year has caused such shock and revulsion to the whole nation that it must be viewed as being at the very extreme level of crime. His culpability and the harm he caused and intended were at the highest.
And Andy, what have we heard today from the families?
Roger, we heard two very powerful and very moving victim impact statements from two of the girls who died. Here's what the family of Elsie Stankham said. "We're not going to stand here and list everything you, Ruda Cabana, have taken away from us because we refuse to give you the satisfaction of hearing it. We will not let you know anything about Elsie because you don't deserve to know the extraordinary person she was. What you did was not only cruel and pure evil, but it was the act of a coward." And here's what the family of Alice da Silva Aguiar said in their statement. "In a matter of minutes, our lives were shattered and turned upside down. It shattered our souls. It feels like we're in a five-dimensional horror movie with movie pictures and moments being relived. We can't get out. Alice was our purpose for living, so what do we do now?" We also heard today from the lawyer representing the families of the three girls who died. Here's what she had to say.
They are grateful that a public inquiry has been announced. They think it's very important that we get to the bottom of any potential systemic failings that led to this horrific event. The families very much want their daughters to be remembered for the way that they lived and not the way in which they died. You know, there are three beautiful young girls at the heart of this, and it is so important that they are remembered in that way.
Just to let you know, finally, Roger, that Southport's MP, Patrick Hurley, has already referred that 52-year minimum sentence to the Attorney General because he says it's too lenient.
Andy, thank you very much. Andy Gill there, live for us at Liverpool Crown Court tonight. Well, Ruda Cabana's sentencing today has, as Andy was outlining, given us new details about exactly what happened on that awful day in Southport, Monday the 29th of July 2024, and what police found in their investigation. Now, just a reminder, most of it's too distressing to be broadcast, but you may still find some aspects of Phil McCann's report upsetting.
All of the things that are disturbing about Axel Ruda Cabana, his custody photo, his silence in court, are nothing compared to when he spoke about what he did at this happy summer holiday dance class on the 29th of July 2024. Today it can be reported that when he was in custody, Ruda Cabana said he was glad that the children were dead. Literally such a good thing those kids are dead. 6 years old, he said.
He clearly had a fascination and a long-standing obsession with significant violence, including focusing on war, genocide and mass murder.
Here he is in the taxi that he took to the Heart Space where the dance class was taking place. He asks the driver for directions. Apart from that, he was silent on the journey. He didn't pay. The driver tried to follow him. The owner of a garage nearby intervened.
I swore at him, said paid a taxi, and then he just told me to, well, he didn't. He just said, what are you going to do about it?
When he gets inside the building, screams are heard just 30 seconds later. followed by children fleeing. There were 26 children inside, making bracelets around tables and singing. Police say he systematically stabbed the 2 adults there and 11 children. Their injuries are too graphic to detail, and their families have asked that they're not. Some ran out, some hid inside. One child was pulled back in by the killer. She survived. When the police got there at 11:57, Rudy Cabana was standing over one of his victims, still holding the kitchen knife he used. Bought on Amazon, it's identical to this one. He dropped it when the police told him to. Then the investigation began, and it soon became clear that this was no random act of violence. The family home was searched. They found lots of weapons. But when they were looking through a bedroom, the search was halted when they found a Tupperware box containing the deadly poison ricin. It was clear Rudy Cabana had made it himself.
One of the documents that was found on his digital devices was an academic paper that contained the text of an Al-Qaeda training manual. Sections of that were repeated in that document, and that gave him a clear idea of how to commit significant acts of violence, including with the use of knife and the poison ricin.
They also found he'd researched war in places like Iraq. He'd read about and watched videos about genocide, torture and violence. Shortly before he left that day, he'd watched a video about this mass stabbing at a church in Australia 2 months earlier. An obsession with extreme violence that he turned into a reality on the most innocent of victims. Phil McCann, BBC Northwest Tonight.
Well, after today's sentencing, focus is now turning to what can be learnt so such a horrifying an attack is never repeated. It's now emerging that the killer Axel Rudy Cabana had years of contact with police, safeguarding teams and even counter-terror services. And yet, he wasn't stopped. Katie Barnfield looks at how and why so many opportunities were missed.
1 week before he killed in Southport, Axel Rudy Cabana's father is pleading with a taxi driver not to take him. He's trying to go back to his old school, where he'd been expelled and had already returned to attack a pupil with a hockey stick. After an argument, Rudy Cabana leaves the car and comes back inside. He is wearing the same outfit he wore on the day of the Southport attack. It's now emerging that not only had his parents called the police about his behaviour several times, he'd had years of contact with different services, from counter-terror to mental health, and still wasn't stopped. Lancashire Police have now revealed they'd been in contact with Rudy Cabana multiple times over a 3-year period between October 2019 and May 2022. That included 4 calls to his family home, a call from his school requesting a welfare check, and a call from Childline after he'd told them he'd brought a knife into school. On one occasion, they were called by a bus driver after he'd refused to pay the fare and was found to be carrying a knife.
Rudy Cabana was taken home and placed in the care of his parents. Officers gave advice to his mother regarding securing knives in the home, and due to the concern about his behaviour, a referral was then made. A vulnerable child referral was then made to the MASH.
After every one of these calls, officers made a referral to what's called the Multi-Agency Safeguarding Hub, or MASH. Rudy Cabana was assessed by the hub, and it was decided social work support was not required. Instead, his family were given guidance on managing his behaviour and emotional well-being.
Alongside the Children's Safeguarding Partnership, we welcome the announcement of an independent public inquiry, and we will fully cooperate with the process.
Rudy Cabana's problems with violence began to emerge in Year 9. As a teenager, he was referred 3 times to the government's Prevent counter-terror scheme. The first was in November 2019, when he was found researching school shootings during an IT class. The second in February 2021, after he uploaded pictures of Colonel Gaddafi to Instagram. The third in April that year, when a teacher noticed tabs open on his computer about the London Bridge terror attack. A month before the first referral, he'd called Childline and asked, "What should I do if I want to kill somebody?" On each occasion, his case was assessed by counter-terror police, but then not sent for specialist support. A review by the Home Office found the referrals should not have been closed.
The same determination that we put to the investigation is now being applied to examining how the range of agencies involved did not come together to effectively understand and identify and deal with the risk that he posed.
Alderhay Hospital have confirmed that Ruda Cabana was under their care for mental health services between 2019 and 2023, when they say he stopped engaging. They say they'll now participate in an upcoming children's safeguarding review to see if any learnings can be made. There will also now be a public inquiry to try and unpick how so many opportunities were missed to identify the threat he posed. Katie Barnfield, BBC North West Tonight.
All those organisations that you heard from in Katie's report have pledged that they will cooperate fully with the public inquiry, which, of course, we will cover in detail when it begins. Now, even though Ruda Cabana was arrested at the scene, the Merseyside police investigation conducted 547 interviews in what the force has called the most harrowing case it's ever had to handle. It was led by Detective Chief Inspector Jason Pye.
It's been extremely difficult. We've always kept the families at the forefront of everything that we've done. That's proved challenging. With 29 victims, I talk about 29 victims because we always from the beginning talked about everybody that was directly impacted from within.
There were 29 in the room.
So we had 26 children, 2 adults, Leanne and Heidi, who came to help, and then you had John, who was working, who tried to come. So they was what we talked about, our 29 victims. And obviously the needs of those victims are very, very different. We had to go out to GMP and Cheshire to make sure that we had enough family liaison officers that could support all of those. As you can imagine, the information came in from all different types of sources. We made a decision early on that a lot of the graphic detail, and there was quite a bit in relation to this, wouldn't be shown to the whole of the investigation team. It would only be seen by certain people within it, and that was to protect them and to ensure that they could do their best while they were with their families as well. And I think it's fair to say that in 23 years of being a detective, it's the worst I've ever had to deal with, bringing all that information together, and the worst that a lot of my colleagues have had to deal with as well.
It's been described as the most harrowing case that Merseyside Police has ever had to investigate. The one thing on the day and in the days subsequent that many people have thought is for those first responders, members of the public, police officers, North West ambulance staff, fire people who came to help. What support has been available to them?
The support has been, and I say the support, obviously we have a duty as Merseyside Police to protect our own staff, as do the other agencies. The support from the very beginning has been absolutely fantastic through the psychological care group, through our own network within Merseyside Police. We had charities reaching out to us, and we very often talked about, I think this is where evil meets good. We've seen the evil, and there's been a lot of good as well. And that comes from people who've cared and tried to help us, the investigation team, other responders as well. And there are people who are still struggling, there are people who haven't returned back to work. They will continue to get support as time goes on, but it has been really impactful across the board, not just in policing. People
watching this will know family members, friends who are members of the emergency services. The one thing you always hear about your line of work is you can't unsee the things you see, you can't unhear the things you hear. Does it live with you?
Yes, and it will obviously continue to do so. It's been said that this is our job, and I accept that this is our job, but you can't train for this. There is no course to prepare you for this type of thing.
Detective Chief Inspector Jason Pye, thanks for talking to us.
Thank you.
While we've been on air, we've had a statement from the family of Elsie Stankham, who, of course, was one of the 3 girls who died. They have said that their heartfelt thanks go to everybody who supported their family. Our condolences and sympathies are with all the other families affected by this tragedy, of course, 2 other girls that died. They've thanked the police for their investigation and said it's therefore right and proper that questions need to be asked, though, and they welcome the announcement of a public inquiry into the events that took place. They say it's very clear from the outset that it's wrong that a young person who grew up in our society could commit such an unspeakable act of hatred. Well, while those who were involved with the investigation, like DCI Pye, who we just heard from, will always remember it, so too will the people who live in Southport. The brutality of the attack targeting young girls made headlines around the world. The riots which followed attempted to sow division. Well, I've been back to the town this week to find a community spirit which locals say is stronger than ever. Nothing demonstrated the unity of this community better than the flowers which filled the pavements around the Hart Street cordon last summer. Mike Ainscough tended to thousands of them outside his home.
I had to do something for it. I couldn't see the flowers just standing against the wall. I started putting them in buckets and I ended up with 300 buckets outside.
Add to that 150 pot plants, which eventually went to the town's botanic gardens, and 15 sacks of cuddly toys, which were brought indoors every night to stop them from getting damp. They were all given to children at Alderhay Hospital.
I made sure that every toy cuddled another toy. So a big toy had a little one sitting on its lap. It was to show that bonding together. We're all together. We're here, we're supporting each other.
And when the riots flared, the people of Southport said, "Not in our name," and came together again.
I knew Southport was a close community, but I never realised how much love and compassion there was. With what's happened and also with the riots the next day, that's not what Southport wants. And I think the message is very clear in Southport that we don't want to be divided.
There are no signs of last summer's violence on the town's mosque today, but the damage caused by last summer's attacks to this town will take longer to fade.
There's been a quiet dignity within Southport when you think about everything that's happened, the scale of the trauma. There has been that quiet dignity, and you have seen people just doing exceptional acts of kindness for each other.
More than £800,000 raised by groups including Southport Together and Swifties for Southport has so far been distributed to support those directly affected by the attack, schools and larger community groups.
I think what surprised us from the donations given is it wasn't just local, it wasn't just national, it was international. So as far as Australia and America, we were receiving donations.
I think a lot of people are still worried. There's a lot of people in Southport tremble when they see blue lights. I think it will worry people that a lot for a long while.
I think all the people who have read and listened to news about Southport, I would love them to actually come and see what there is here, because there's so much more than what you see in the news.
Just some of the people in Southport who I spoke to a day that they and indeed I will never forget. If you've been affected by any of the issues surrounding the events in Southport, there are details of organisations which can help and offer support on the BBC Action Line. There's the address, bbc.co.uk/action line. It'll give you links through to different organisations. Now, we'll have a weather forecast for you in just a moment, but what happened in Southport on that summer's day is something which will haunt so many people for so long. The families of Elsie, Alice and Bibi's trauma, of course, is unimaginable. The 26 other people who were in the room, the first responders who bravely ran towards danger, Sergeant Greg Gillespie, Acting Sergeant Luke Holden and Police Community Support Officer Tim Parry, who were among them. They were the first three on the scene, and they were the ones who detained the killer. And the members of the public, of course, who helped, all those who treated the injured, those who investigated the crime. There will be many questions to be answered, and as we've said, the public inquiry should do everything to achieve that. Southport will not be defined by July the 29th, 2024, nor by the riots which followed. But it is a day which that town and many people there and further afield will never forget. Good night.
This is the most harrowing and large-scale investigation the force has ever dealt with. I want to thank the victims and their families for the dignity and understanding they have shown since the 29th of July. I would also like to pay tribute to three little girls, Elsie, Bibi and Alice, whose beautiful faces and names will be etched on the minds of people across Merseyside and indeed the UK forever.
Good evening. All talk in the weather department about Storm Eowyn. Now, the storm is arriving as we head overnight tonight and into tomorrow morning. Excuse me. we are looking at gusts of up to 90 miles per hour. This is especially for more exposed coasts and hills as well. So let's take a look at that in more detail. So while the winds are the key feature, we are going to have some torrential rain. Over the tops of the hills, there will be a little bit of snow as well. It'll be a fast-moving feature. So let's take a quick look at the pressure chart. You can see where the deepening area of low pressure continues to push up to the north. The most severe deep pressure system the island has had. For us, it's going to be the strength of those winds, coastal parts especially, up to and in excess of 85, if not 90 miles per hour. The calm before the storm, currently a brief ridge of high pressure before the rain sweeps in, and this will be quite torrential, but it will push through quite quickly. For coastal parts, for the Isle of Man, it'll be dry by the end of the night, but it's here where the wind gusts are going to be the worst. So we're covered with an amber warning. The Isle of Man, you have your own red warning. Away from there, we've got yellow warnings. Warnings right across the board from 6 o'clock in the morning through to 9 o'clock tomorrow night. The winds will gradually ease, very gradually. It's not going to be until tomorrow night when they will eventually calm down. There will be disruption to travel and on the roads. Avoid travel if possible. 5 to 7 degrees top temperatures tomorrow. Now, a brief ridge then overnight into Saturday. Saturday, actually, it doesn't look too bad at all. However, we'll get a next front in. There'll be some rain through the evening, perhaps even a little bit of hill snow, and another area of low pressure starts to push up as we head through Sunday. Now, that hasn't been named, but it's potentially will be. So do keep an eye on the forecast. We remain unsettled with low pressure right throughout, and we'll keep you right up to date here on BBC North West tonight. That's it. Night-night.